So that's the thing. You simply can't allow this sort of activity from people who are supposed to be peace officers. And any laws that are put in place that infringe the rights of the people, well, these are no law. These are entitled to no obedience. You need to build strong communities so that you can stand together to address these laws. And should you see a police officer brutalizing someone and you walk up and you intervene in a manner that I've mentioned as a community, and this police officer dares to say that you were interfering with the police officer in the performance of his duty, well, you can simply say to the court, well, no, we weren't, because the duty of a peace officer is to peacefully take someone into custody. We weren't interfering in the actions of a police officer in the performance of his duty. We were intervening in the actions of a thug who was terrorizing a member of the public. He just happened to have a police uniform on, which makes his actions even more unacceptable than if it was carried out by an everyday member of society, because this man is employed as a peace officer and he was creating a very major disturbance. Remember, folks, the Nazis were supposed to have lost the war. Many of us had parents and grandparents who died to protect us from the actions that our modern police officers are now carrying out against members of the public who really do not deserve to be treated in the way they are. The duty of police officers is to uphold the peace and to uphold the law of the land as defined by the Constitution of our relative countries. It's not to uphold statutes. It's not to enforce state legislation that infringes upon people's basic constitutional rights. This is simply not acceptable in any country. Now, folks, a lot of people have been asking me about the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. A lot of people have been saying, well, what's the worst case scenario for this thing? And like, it's a really, I mean, there's so much different information coming out about it. It's really hard to discern what's real and what isn't. What we do know about the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, looking at it objectively, is that we're not being told what's actually going on. That's really all we know. And as I said a few shows ago, either it's 10 times worse than what they're telling us, or 100 times worse than what they're telling us, or it's a hoax. It's an event that's been staged, it's being used for something else. Or it's possibly an event that's been staged to do something else that has gone horribly wrong, or perhaps it's what they intended all along. There are some people who are saying this isn't an oil leak, it's a mud volcano, or it's something volcanic. And like I said, it's really hard to find verifiable information because the whole area is locked down so much. And the most likely scenario is that the entire area is locked down because it's nothing like what they're telling us. So again, we're left with the question, what is it? Is it massively bad, or is it simply a mud volcano that they are using as an excuse to spray lots of neurotoxins in the water before hurricane season? I mean, you've got to look at the whole thing, folks. As I said, it seems deliberate. I mean, there's so much pointing to it being deliberate. But why would they do it? Why would they do it if it is a legitimate oil leak? Because such a leak could do an incredible amount of damage. It could virtually kill the oceans. Or it could simply kill the oceans in the Northern Hemisphere. But whichever way, it could do an awful lot of damage. So why would they do this? Now, you've got everything that I mentioned last week. You've got everything that I mentioned this week about all the different things that indicate that it was an inside job. You've got the Freemasons set square and compass. You've really got to wonder. I mean, it's kind of blatant, folks. It almost seems like a setup. It seems like someone's setting up the Freemasons. Hey, blame these guys. Blame these guys. Here's the secret society. It's a secret group at the top of this secret society. So here's a compass. We'll draw it for you. So you blame them. You know what I mean? You've really got to be objective about the whole thing. But what's the worst case scenario if this oil leak is legitimately an oil leak, which I think it is, folks. I honestly do think that this is a leak, and I think it's been done purposely, and I think they know exactly what they're doing. Now, when you look at the abiotic oil theory, which I actually personally believe to be a very, very sound theory, the concept that oil basically reproduces, it's basically created by the earth, by the heat of the core and just geological movement and action, and it just basically self-generates. The oil fields are never going to deplete, and most of the oil fields where oil is extracted from are located reasonably close to the surface, but these are fed by much deeper oil fields. Now, every time someone has tapped into one of these oil fields, I think the Russians have done it like 4 times or something. They've tapped into one of these oil fields, and every time they have, it's been complete disaster. They've had to usually set off a little nuke to cauterize the well, because it just explodes the rig and it all turns pear-shaped. So they have to do whatever they can to seal these leaks. But they've always done them on dry land. There's never been one drilled into one of these deep, deep oil deposits in 5,000 feet of water. And to do so is complete madness. So I don't really think that anyone who runs BP would have been stupid enough to actually do this without intending to cause a problem. It's just absurd. It's the most brain dead. Like I said a few shows ago, folks, if you were to write a recipe for a disaster, you'd probably include all of the above. So it seems incomprehensible that this could have been done anything but deliberately, because I seriously don't think anybody could be that stupid. So why would it have been done, and what is the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario is that it actually gets into the Atlantic Ocean in massive amounts, and it shuts down the Atlantic conveyor. Now, there's all sorts of talk. There's talks of methane deposits underneath, which of course would be happening. The well shaft is obviously ruptured. This is of course why the top kill didn't work, because the top kill would have gone out into areas where the well shaft's ruptured. So, it's obvious it wasn't going to work. It's obvious that if this is a legitimate leak, folks, it's going to shake the wellhead loose. It's going to form fissures and cracks all over the sea floor. It's going to erupt an enormous amount of oil, and we're going to see a major, major earth-changing event. But what it will do, this event has the potential to basically kill the Earth's oceans, and this could kill all life on the planet. This is probably the worst case scenario, but the second worst case scenario is almost just as bad. And the second worst case scenario is probably the best we can hope for if this is a legitimate leak. Because what this will do is it will shut down the Atlantic conveyor. The Atlantic conveyor is the current that brings the warm water from the equator to the North Pole. The water sinks, it travels back to the equator, it rises. It's like a washing machine type effect. It's this circular motion of the currents, and this is called the Atlantic conveyor. Now, this conveyor brings the warm air and the warm water to the northern reaches of the planet, and this keeps the climate intact. The ocean conveyors are basically the Achilles heel of the climate on Earth. This is the one thing that you could affect that would affect climate on Earth. This was the big scare with global warming, folks. They were worried that the glaciers might melt, the ice might melt, it would dilute the salt water, and it would shut down the conveyor. The conveyor would shut down the seasons, basically. If you shut down the conveyor, you basically would bring about an ice age. And oil in the Atlantic Ocean has the potential to do this, because the oil will trap the salt. You see, the oil will trap the salt in the water. It'll get stuck in the oil, and it won't keep the conveyor happening, because the conveyor basically operates because of salt. If the salt wasn't in the water, the conveyor wouldn't exist, and the Earth would basically be a ball of ice. This is an amazing thing about our climate. So, if this oil gets into the Atlantic Ocean in any type of significant degree, it has the potential to shut down the Atlantic conveyor, and this will bring about an ice age in the Northern Hemisphere. And that is possibly one of the best case scenarios if this leak is legitimate.